History shapes everything we do and everything we believe. Across the centuries, a few have written the stories of humanity, and in doing so, have silenced countless others. Chokepoints Through Time is where those voices are heard again. Join Dr. Wayne Sedlak, linguist, scholar of ancient languages and history, pastor, former missionary to Africa, graduate school dean, and professor, as he opens the door to our forgotten past. From the tablets of lost civilizations to the chronicles of empires long fallen, discover the truths history tried to hide and the forces that still shape our world today. Chokepoints Through Time, a journey through the pivotal moments of mankind's story. This is history as you've never heard it before. And now, here is Dr. Wayne Sedlak.
Hello again. I'd like to welcome you to Chokepoints Through Time. Before we begin, I'd like to introduce to you, maybe this isn't an introduction, maybe you've already heard it before, but if you haven't, we're offering our Biblical Economics class this coming September. It'll be twice a week. It'll be live online. It's free of charge, and we've had a lot of success in reaching out to people around the world. People have come in their time zones. Of course, a live lesson. I teach it myself Tuesdays and Thursdays at 1 o'clock Central Time. There in the afternoon for an hour and a half. 1 until 2:30 Central Time. Mark that on your calendar. We begin Tuesday, September 8th. Why would we need that? Because the Christian church has been flanked by the science of money. The science of money is a very powerful body of truth and of, shall I say, trickery, deceits. And the Bible teaches what those deceits are. The love of money is the root of all evil. Not money itself, but its love, its idolization. Now, we're going to be doing that this coming September. We've had great success. Like I said, you can go to our website at visionviewpoint.com. You can register there. Anybody in the family can sign up for it. It's designed for homeschoolers, for those that want a real economics course. I am a little disappointed in many of the economics courses that are out there. I have to say they are so basic that at times I wonder why study them. This is different. This teaches entrepreneurship, no doubt. But it teaches us how money, wealth, economics are used to flank, meaning to outwit, to destroy cultures, societies, and Christian faith. Furthermore, understanding something about money, its prevalence all throughout the scriptures, its use and its abuse, you'll learn an awful lot about interpreting your Bible. I know there are many people that still believe that Acts 4 through 6 teaches some sort of biblical communism or biblical socialism. No, it doesn't. What most people don't realize, though, in fact, maybe 1 in 1,000, I've asked this question on surveys to pastors, and they did not know that Acts 4 through 6 and Barnabas, who funded the common fund, they had things in common there. That common fund was an emergency fund. Barnabas, being a Levite, sold a house and initiated the fund. And where was he getting the model for it? Well, Levites in the Old Testament a group of them were renowned for their charity. Levites did different things, one of which was what we would call diaconal duties, charity and benevolence. And Leviticus 27 is the chapter that your apostles and Barnabas were using. Maybe 1 in 1,000 know that in the churches. In any event, we'll be studying those issues. So I want to invite you, mark it on your calendar, invite your friends, put notices up in your churches. Go to visionviewpoint.com. You can get the information. I'd appreciate it if you put it up on your church bulletin. Send the word around to church and homeschool groups. Invite adults. We have many adults. There have been times we've had more adults than than teenagers. In any event, again, it's an opportunity for you. I'm going to begin this lesson, and this is our mini-series within Chokepoints. This is our mini-series on insights of the Christian faith. Things that bespeak discovery, marvels, created and understood by individual Christians that brought about real change, real transformation. Transformation of character, societal transformation, churches that were transformed, doctrines that were matured, ethics that were matured and discerning, like, for example, economics. In fact, let me start with one. John Chapman. He lived from 1774 to 1845. You probably know him as Johnny Appleseed. His ethics, his work was to plant orchards of apples, and he did so. He was actually a wealthy man. He dressed like a pauper, but he was a very wealthy man. He's a good businessman. When you see a particular, there are markers for him when he died all over what was called the Northwest Territory. Ohio, Indiana, Illinois, West Virginia. There were markers everywhere commemorating his life. He planted orchards of apples, hence Johnny Appleseed. Now, on a particular marker that I'm looking at, I believe it's from Ohio, it says Johnny Appleseed, John Chapman, he lived for others. There's a picture of the Holy Bible and a date, the dates of his life, 1774 through 1845. His ethic was so Christian that people thought he's a Christian. Actually, he said he was a Christian, but what he really was a Swedenborgian. That's a mouthful. He was a mystic, and Swedenborgianism followed the teachings of Emanuel Swedenborg, who was an occultist, a spiritist. Johnny Appleseed was a mystic, but he was living in a land that was Christian, and his deeds were influenced by the ethics of Christianity. He admitted it. Now, what I'm about to say next may surprise you a little bit. See, I'm wearing a shirt today that's a little different from what I normally do. It is a shirt that celebrates the graduation from the Marine Corps of our grandson. We were there 2 weeks ago. What does Johnny Appleseed have to do with the Marine Corps? Now, on the face of it, it might seem, well, you got Johnny Appleseed spreading peace, planting fruit, and you have a Marine Corps. They're trained to fight in wars. Of course they are. But there's a lot more to that comparison than meets the eye. You see, I'm looking at a book that has the archived works of the institutions that formed our republic early on. A fellow by the name of Morris. Morris was a fellow that in 1864 gathered archived proofs, testimonies, documents demonstrating the fact that America was a Christianized nation institutionally. Of course, there were plenty of people that were individually Christian, but what about the institutions of the republic? Well, Benjamin Morris was his name. This book is loaded with institutional proofs that demonstrated that, proofs of the character of our early Congresses, not just congressmen in it, of our early Congresses, our legislatures, our states, our state and federal judiciary, right on through the 1800s. We were declared a Christian nation repeatedly by statements of the judiciary, contrary to our modern Supreme Court. Can't seem to find a handle on our early history. Talk about turning a blind eye. I'm sure it's the same blind eye they turned to their engraved copy of the Ten Commandments on the walls of the Supreme Court. Who do you think put that there? They certainly didn't. They denied that there was anything like a Christianized nation. Now, going back to the Marine Corps and Johnny Appleseed, you see, turning to Benjamin Morris's work, and we have reference to a number of these things on our website, visionviewpoint.com. You can go there and you can find a lot of these kinds of resources. Some for sale, some that are just given away free. But the point is, the comparison I'm making here is that both the implements of warfare and the men that serve our armed forces were designed by Christians. Positions in the military were by Christian people. Not all, but the leadership most often was. Setting the standard for a different kind of soldier. See, throughout history, you go back to Roman and Greek history, you can look at our history of the ancient world on the website. You'll see that I do much with ancient Greeks and the Romans. Those civilizations and civilizations down to today have been dominated, around the world have been dominated by what I like to call a conquer thy neighbor ethic. Christianity brings a challenge to that ethic. Agape. And agape love is more than just an individual response to another individual. Institutionalized, agape is powerful, meaning it becomes the centerpiece and the standard for institutional action. Civil government, soldiers, families, marriage, education, businesses, charities, voluntary associations, and outstanding individuals like Johnny Appleseed, who borrowed an ethic from America that he didn't actually technically believe in. He claimed he was a Christian, granted. I don't believe he died a Christian. But he learned much of the ethic of Christianity and spread peace and brought food to thousands of people by planting orchards. The American soldier historically has had a different code of honor. Historically, America sent men into battle who were trained to be kind and charitable to non-combatants, and yet courageously fierce in battle. Was it Lord Nelson, Admiral Lord Nelson, said of the American victory against the Barbary pirates when our ships entered Barbary pirates' harbor and blew up their shipping? Lord Nelson, the great Christian admiral of the English Navy, said that was the boldest act of the age. He admired the kind of courage the Americans showed very early on in our republic. So our soldiers learn to love so deeply it brings a courage to heart. At least that's what the church is supposed to be teaching. Greater love is no man than this, that a man laid down his life for his friends. That ethic combined love and a fierce, courageous stand against evil in the early republic. The soldier was defending from agape, love for his people, not a conquering ethic of his enemies in the sense that he wanted to plunder and loot and spoil and rape. That's still against the law in our soldiery and should be against the law. A new kind of military emerged, just like a new kind of man who's not a Christian but looked like a Christian. John Chapman, Johnny Appleseed. It's an amazing I believe, a comparison because both acts of love come from the same source. The churches teaching the Word of God in America. John Chapman imbibing the spirit of the Christian faith as far as its good works. Remember, show me your faith without your works, I'll show you my faith by my works. Good works testify, and non-believers can often copy some of those works, or in copying, they may not have the fruits of the Spirit, in fact, they don't, but they can try to counterfeit, or more to the point, mimic, to the degree that they bring a blessing of sorts, like Johnny Appleseed did. He spread apples all throughout what was called the Northwest Territory. And that territory, basically what we now call West Virginia, Ohio, Indiana, Illinois, Michigan, especially southern Michigan, and parts of Wisconsin. That territory, George Washington set a proclamation in the Northwest Territory that there was to be an education, a Christian education provided in the territory. Now, he knew as a surveyor, he had surveyed massive areas of that territory. He knew the churches were already out there. Settlers were planting churches. The Yankee Exodus I spoke of a little time ago, maybe 2 or 3 episodes ago. Yankee Exodus from New England was already flooding into the Northwest Territory. Remember de Tocqueville? I mentioned Alexis de Tocqueville by 1840, looking back in archives of America, said he was amazed that rich New Englanders, as well as many other middle class and even lower class New Englanders, Christians, all flooded out into the Northwest Territory and further out into the West, wanting to plant Christianity on the banks of the Missouri and the Mississippi. Rich New Englanders he set aside as a peculiar class because he said they had it made back home. Why would they go out there? Because, he said, the impulse to establish Christianity out in the Northwest Territory and beyond was so strong in them. They knew that new states would be carved out of those territories and what built America as a republic and as a Christian nation had to be reinforced, had to be reduplicated out in the West. Or in losing the West, they might lose their government to paganized states. Rich New Englanders could afford to go out there and not only establish themselves on a farm, they could patronize others and bring them out, and they could start churches. Can you imagine? Wealthy New Englanders, what they view as an investment would be starting a church on the banks of the Missouri River. Imagine that. You rarely hear of that today. Apart from missionaries going to a foreign land, you don't hear that same emphasis today. Johnny Appleseed was a good businessman. Yes, he acted and dressed as if he was poor, but he purchased and developed thousands of acres of orchard. And then he let people freely pick from them. Getting out to the West, people, of course, had to sell their goods, and they would buy a Conestoga wagon. Massive migrations. West, northwest, west, as far west as you can go to California, Pacific Ocean. Down to the south, down into Florida. That began with the Yankee Exodus, a distinctly Christian movement in America. The same New England that produced that Yankee Exodus was known for its town hall meetings. Now again, town hall meetings, Conestoga wagons. Town hall meetings bespeak a setting where people are secured in a town and they're developing their town. Usually, by the way, they met in churches. Conestoga wagons, the Yankee Exodus bespeaks Migration. They're not settling in towns. They're going to settle new towns or farms. So what's the connection? The Christian faith. You see, the town hall meetings drew heavily from a people that were taught in their pulpits, taught the civil laws of God, taught about the elders in the gates, we now call them aldermen, taught about the laws designed in the Old and New Testament to instruct civil magistrates and the people that support them. Back then, there were many kinds of celebrations. Yes, they had their July 4th. They would later have a Thanksgiving. They had the unofficial holiday since the very beginning, but the Pilgrims, but later became a real holiday. We know those holidays, but what about the other ones? Times of election, there would be something called election sermons. Those election sermons could move an entire election. A man, imagine, gets into the pulpit, teaches the people about the character of civil magistrates, and he can warn them if some scoundrel is running for office. He can remind them of some scoundrel who's an incumbent. Look what he did. We as a church advised him. He wouldn't listen. You recall I told you not too long ago that the West was won by what? The church. The church won the West. Many of the sheriffs, in fact, most of the sheriffs attended church. Many were officers in the church, like Wyatt Earp, Matt Masterson. The Texas Rangers, for the longest time, were led by Christian people. You know, none of that's accidental. Conestoga Wagon was a form of missionary endeavor out of the conviction given in the churches in New England and elsewhere in the East. But many went out west to settle as a Christian territory, later Christian states. The town hall meeting in New England, the concept was carried out into the West. You see, as de Tocqueville also said, looking through the archives of America, the idea of Christianity, freedom, and constitutionalism all went hand in hand. In Europe, the church is threatened by government. In Europe, there are churches that threaten government. It works both ways. So in America, they're friends. That is to say, church and civil government. Church and freedom. Just as our Liberty Bell says, proclaim liberty throughout all the land and all the inhabitants thereof, taken right out of Leviticus. Proclaim liberty throughout all the land. And you know what? The Conestoga Wagons carried liberty with them in the hearts of their people, carried the concept of the town hall meeting, government of the people, by the people, and for the people, as Abraham Lincoln put it. You see those concepts. The town hall meeting that would secure people where they were, the Conestoga Wagon that's taking a mission out to establish a new kind of town hall, a new territory, a new kind of work in the West, a new town hall meeting, because you have new towns and churches that spring up, but it's really not new. Christianity United became the cause of many, many discoveries. I have shelves full of economics. You folks probably know that's big part of my background. Just about every one of them will say that Adam Smith, 1776, Wealth of Nations, His Invisible Hand, that's pretty much the beginning of modern economics. Adam Smith was a good man, but no, it was not the birth of modern economics. Weber, in 1906, pointed out in his famous Weber thesis that sound economy was part of the Huguenot religion, produced outstanding businessmen, merchants, as well as managers for businesses. They were at the last half of the 1500s, all through the 1600s, and then France, King Louis XVI drove them out. He was of the medieval Roman Catholic persuasion, and he persecuted them and drove the Huguenots out. Nations welcomed the Huguenots because of their economic and business prowess. They were honest people, they were family people, and they were productive. And it is a well-known fact that when the Huguenots were driven out, when they came to America, went to southern Africa, went to Germany, parts of Switzerland, England, up into the New York area, New Jersey area, here in America. Well-known fact that Louis XVI drove the Huguenots out. France's economy went into a tailspin. One catastrophe, one collapse after another. The next 100 years resulting, 100 years later, in the French Revolutionary Nightmare, the rise of the guillotine. No, Adam Smith wasn't the first. The Huguenots really were among the first, and many point to John Calvin out of Geneva. I know you've heard of John Calvin, the alleged bigot, man of predestination, it doesn't preach the gospel, all that propaganda that smeared his character by Jerome Balzac, an enemy. Picked up and sent throughout Europe by the medieval church. Can certainly understand why they would do that. John Calvin unleashed one of the greatest evangelism movements in history. He's also the father of modern economics, modern free market economics. And yes, he got it wrong in certain areas. But John Calvin did teach a sound economy, and the churches in Geneva duplicated in their preaching all that teaching after he was gone. Of course, they did it while he was alive, but when he was gone, they perpetuated it, and Geneva prospered. So did the Swiss cantons, provinces that were Protestant, where his writings were in demand. The English Puritans, the Scottish Reformation, the English Presbyterians, many of the Lutherans of Northern Europe and of Germany, many fine business people, brilliant in their own understanding of economics, long preceded Adam Smith. Sound economy comes out of the scriptures, as I hope you'll see if you join with us in September. Again, sign up, Vision Viewpoint. Let people know in churches and homeschoolers. And by the way, we do a lot of busy work. The kids learn how to focus. They learn how to take notes. They learn how to think and focus for throughout the class. We teach them how to focus, which, by the way, is a valuable economic talent when you take it into life. It wasn't Darwin who popularized modern science. It was, in fact, the Protestant Reformation and great scientists like Galileo, like Sir Isaac Newton, like Robert Boyle, Michael Faraday. Many great Christian men who were moved by the Holy Spirit, who took up their callings not in the pulpit, but rather their callings in the laboratory. in field investigation. There was a scientific explosion dominated by Christian thinkers, scientists, mathematicians. Isaac Newton invented the calculus. He didn't just discover it. How many of these people were commoners? Common folk made great by the economic concept of calling. You'll hear that in September too. The idea of calling revolutionized the soul of young people. We have young people everywhere that are bitter, and some think it's because the church, the families are losing their kids because of this, because of that. Yeah, there's all kinds of reasons, but I find one in particular. The kids look to the leadership in their homes and even their churches for calling. They don't find it. They find some sort of immature calling among their peers. They become very loyal to their peers, copying and mimicking what their peers teach them. That's not calling, but there's a loyalty, a bond established. The economic concept of calling unto stewardship, entrepreneurship, all of these things should be developed from the pulpit. Remember, it is my contention, it's not just about economics, it's not just about economics, meaning wealth and money making. It's about character, and it's about interpretation. I started you on the idea that in Acts chapter 4 through 6, the concept that the Bible would teach some sort of communism is foreign to the Bible. It doesn't. Leviticus 27, the last chapter of Leviticus, is what they were using. It wasn't communism. But nations have been perverted by that teaching. Revolutionaries have infected the church by bringing in communism into the church. So on that basis, look, there's communism in Acts. No, there's not. Bad interpretation ends up perverting, twisting good character. So economics, yes, it's about economics. It's also about entrepreneurship. It's also about knowing the trickery of the money science. It's also about how to interpret your Bible and how to compound the effect of sound economy into stewardship in all aspects of life. How about those lessons? With that, we revolutionize, in a good sense, and transform society around us. May God bless you.
This has been Chokepoints Through Time with Dr. Wayne Sedlak. Visit us at visionviewpoint.com, where you'll find a host of articles, books, and videos designed to answer any questions you may have. Join us Tuesdays and Fridays for Chokepoints Through Time with Dr. Wayne Sedlak.